understand. Oh.
I think if we're doing introductions, we should probably, this is gonna be welcome.
My name, I got my name out before the recording. Hi, Chris Davis, interested. What is it?
Davis on Bald Mountain Road, interested parties. I'm Catherine Colberg. I work for Panhandle Health District and I supervise the Bonner and Boundary counties for environmental health, septic permitting, and development, food inspection.
Wayne Martin, live out in Voodoo Valley. Concerned about they have to do some special areas. Complaints.
Susan Martin. Cindy Lois, the conservation team lead for the Natural Resource Conservation Service, Water and Boundary.
Jennifer Kramer, I was interested in participating.
Cheryl Reese, right member.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
So Cheryl Reed, I was a private member of Water County Planning Zoning Commission. Betty Anderson, and I served on the Silly Samuels Committee Area Planning.
Diane Wheeler's the same, served on the plan, and we did request many things to be updated and help track that if you need it.
Okay.
John Plant, concerned citizen. Hi, I'm Susan Bowman. I'm a planning consultant for Keep On County Rural. And we have been trying to take part in the comprehensive plan process, but the last meeting that I went to, I got the chance to look at the backs of all of the planning commission. And so it has been very clear that they have not wanted to include people in this process. And so that's why I'm here today, because it looks like Asia has decided to change that. And so I want to give her a big yay. For allowing the people to take process. And also, just so you know, I've been a planner for 20 odd years. And what I can tell you is that planning is of, by, and for the people. It is that is what it's supposed to be. And so I'm glad to see so many faces here today, because planning is supposed to be what you want for your community, not what the Bonner County Board of Commissioners wants for their own purposes. And so I think today is the first step in for making a great change for making the comp plan our comp plan. Hello.
I'll just, my name is Jacob Storms. I'm the Bonner County IT Director. This is my network engineer photograph. We're going to be available for support. You're all obviously aware Commissioner Williams is tied up upstairs. If you haven't been told, there's refreshments here, all that good stuff. We're probably going to stop recording. I know we had a couple, we just had someone come in. So if she decides at some point again to maybe do introductions, we can go from there. But we'll be available if anybody needs anything for right in the hall. So we'll be waiting for her and she'll get this.
They just say how long she would be, or she doesn't really know.
The executive session can go, actually both meetings can go for however long we can do. So I can go upstairs and get word to see where they're at and come down and let y'all know. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So are you, we had 3 of us have not introduced ourselves.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. We haven't
So I
stopped
think you
recording.
should be, I'm on Margaret Hall. I was on the Planning and Zoning Commission since from 2005 to 2016 through the Title 12 updates and earlier updates on the plan and the Title 12.
Yeah, please, if you just joined us, go ahead and introduce yourselves. We just had everybody here introduce themselves, and it's Commissioner Williams wanted this meeting while she wanted it presented, recorded, and put on YouTube, so everyone present, you know. I think there's a sign-in sheet, to be honest.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, we can pause it. We'll go ahead and pause it. And we'll see where she goes.
Sign the seat.
Jason's sweater, right?
Okay. Okay. There you go. We want to sign it. Okay. Right. Oh, okay.
What we are going to do. Okay, thank you. We're gonna pause the recording.
They just started doing.
They're going.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen.
Good to know.
Communication we had all recording. In the interest of time, Asia is.
They tried to go back to public already and then they bumped.
Asia is still up in executive session,
Second part of the executive.
so, what we're proposing is that we just kind of start the slides. Keep it open and discuss the slides individually. I don't know what's on the slides. Okay, so that automatically puts me in the hot seat. Okay, all I got is a controller and a button.
What is your name?
My name is Merlin Glass. I'm a city councilman for the city of Dover. My background, 36 years in the fire service, hazardous materials tech specialist for my whole career. My last job was with planning section chief with FEMA. So I kind of know how disasters go and how do you get out of that box. Outside of that, this says hazardous areas. Okay, I don't know what that means. So we're gonna find out. We did a little, yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Ekstrom and I work with the Idaho Conservation League, and as much as I respect and admire your get up and go, it seems to me that since Commissioner Williams called this workshop, that it might be most appropriate if we wait for her to proceed. As much as we all are here and want to get started, it just seems like she needs to hear the discussion at hand.
Yeah,
There's also people upstairs that are waiting. That are here for this.
to get down.
They're waiting for
Schedule
Asia to
this.
take.
We should just review this information for a bit.
Okay, I mean, I'm
Okay,
good with all of it.
Commissioner Williams asked for this to start.
Oh.
So she's the one who actually had, I forget the Kristen come down, let us know that she'd like this to proceed,
Oh, I see.
even in her absence, so. We just,
She was in here
We-
earlier,
we're,
and she laid out one thing about the slide presentation, but it's pretty self-explanatory, so that's what I'm hopeful for. That it generates conversation amongst you all. And so. And. Y'all, difference between y'all and all y'all.
Y'all, yes.
All y'all right here. We'll work with the slides. Yes, ma'am.
Is somebody taking?
It's recorded. Yeah. So.
What's your name again?
Merlin Glass. Okay. And I'm just like you guys. Okay. So this is the agenda. Going to start out, pretty much we've already done an introduction. And the planning commission's goals, the primary goals, hazardous areas, and we'll get down to special areas and sites. And as we roll along, since I don't know what's on this, if it's something that piques your interest, jump in. Now, Asia, I'm assuming, is the genesis for this kind of situation that we're in right here today. I have hopes of information coming out that I can take back to my community as well as all the rest of you choosing. So the point of contact would be Asia or email. Planning commission's made up of members. Some of you have been past members, I think. In planning and zoning. Knowledge and expertise. District 3 is in need of 2 planning commissioners. And so if anybody's interested, I guess that's what it's asking.
And District 3 is where?
I'm sorry.
What's District 3 area? The McDonald's area?
Like the Silly Valley.
Yeah.
Shelly Valley.
People want here, so I am.
Is that a pretty important area?
Very.
They're all explored.
No. Well, I mean, in recent history, I've heard a lot of Shelly Valley pop out, so I know that that's kind of a
Yeah.
target area.
It's one of our last agricultural areas.
The duties. Consider previous and existing conditions, trends, capabilities, land uses. Desirable goals. Hopefully, with that cover sheet, it's asked you for your input. That'll maybe topic where they add some desirable goals in there. Maps, charts, and reports. All those are background information for the decisions to get made. So I do wish that Asia was here to expand on the purpose of the workshop. I know from personally where I stand, what I hope for. I never promote public interest. I think we all share that. Changes to the hazardous areas and special interest areas and sites. I noticed on that first page with the statute, the last time it was changed in 1975. Okay, so maybe that's something that we can focus on when we're looking through those things. How old is this stuff? Is it current? Do you need to change it? So you all have a single copy. Hopefully you all have one. Title 67, 6507, 08, 09. Current comprehensive plan for the following areas of hazardous areas, special areas and sites. Proposed changes to the following areas. Hazardous areas, special area sites, and fish and game comments. And then some contact form. That's right.
Are there any more copies of these packets? Well, I know there were some, but.
Listen, I got one.
Okay, this young lady does not have.
Is that yours?
Sure.
Here, I was seeing
That's online, but I can make copies.
Okay. Contained in there is hazardous areas or target areas. One thing that jumped out at me for that, my fire background is that in a municipality, we used to have in the old school way, which we would have what was called a sandboard map. And what that would be an overlay of the community, changing colors according to the amount of target hazard. That would be useful in trying to determine in our counties where we have to look. Format. Presentation begins with the hazardous section and then the special areas. Changes. Chapter for breakout session, the tables discuss proposed changes. Come back to the presentation, provide community feedback. And there's going to be a next session, I guess. Some of the recommended changes are cleanup efforts, like a page I pointed out, 1975, maybe that could be dressed up with today's needs. Recommendations is to remove much of the historical data that may take up an entire section, but may be considered too antiquated. You see a section that's not represented in the presentation, go along and please say something so we can review it. So try and capture that your thoughts down on paper. In a setting like this, it's hard to get things out if we don't know each other that well.
Fancy.
I didn't know that this thing could do that. All right. Analysis of known hazards as a result of susceptibility to surface ruptures from faulting, ground shaking, ground failure, landslides, mudslides, avalanche, hazards resulting from development in the known or probable path of snowslides, avalanche to the floodplain. Anybody live in Dover? I guess I'm the only one. Okay, you know that the Dover Bay was established on a mill, on a logging site, a mill site, right? That soil right there, as much as they want to compact it, and put houses on top and everything like that. I got neighbors that have that much water underneath their house because of the pressure from the river. It's there, okay? So all those things contribute to hazardous areas.
So Glenn, before you move forward, I'm curious, and this is something that these to know, because I saw Bob Pellet here who's in EMS. And we have a hazard mitigation plan, and I am curious if those, what you just read, line up with our hazard mitigation plan and the areas that they're actually working.
Well, I know that he's been working and has made a lot of changes to his plan. How that fits in the overall comp plan. I don't know what the last date of. I think it's 2017 was the last update.
It is, but I'm just
Typically, they
wondering
do.
is if we have the same, are we looking at those same breakdowns of those items in the hazardous areas as might be being looked at in hazard mitigation plan?
Yeah, the comp plan usually gets updated about every 5 years.
Uh,
Well, I mean,
ideally,
hopefully it doesn't.
I
Really admit that it does. But yeah, it's good to capture those ideas because we do have to move forward, right? Proposed ground failure, formatting, change, historical data. Section 1.1 for faults. Removes reference to the new fault zone. Or the new fault zone, I'm sorry. Some references are from 1972. You'll see probably the early 70s a lot in terms of earthquakes. Because a lot of things happen on the West Coast and that caused government to kick in and change a lot of things. Current faulting and earthquakes. 1.2 reference to Newport fault impacting the eastern shore of Creek River. Who's from Creek River? Got one over here, two, okay. So that's personal to you.
So why was that removed?
Because of the historical data is old.
But it, I mean, does that,
But
removing it seems to insinuate that the fault.
I'm assuming that they haven't
exists.
changed it, this is proposing to look at it.
Well, but the new proposed chapter, it says it underlined right there, removes the reference to the Newport fault zone, it just doesn't make sense. Why? Just because it was identified in a historic document in this situation, it doesn't seem like the fault would have gone away.
Yeah, the fault would still be there.
Yes.
The fault would still be there.
Yeah, so why would they remove
They're,
it?
they're,
Well, you don't know.
no, I don't know. Okay, I'm assuming they're gonna do the right thing. Okay, so start with that premise and say that the data from 1972 hasn't been updated. And so if there's other updates, I mean, you could end up with maybe 3 more faults identified.
Well, and faults can expand too, so, what's changed from that? Not necessarily mistakes.
So we should look at what has changed rather than just remove it
Right.
perhaps.
Right.
I agree.
So normally, let me speak a little bit to the comprehensive planning process that should be going on, okay, as a planner, and I've written comp plans. What should be going on here is the planning department should be doing research, okay? On, so let's say, for example, what has been updated since the last comp plan? So if our existing comp plan has only 1972 data in it, they would go out and they would research and say, okay, what do we know since then about faults in our area? That would be data that they would gather. And then from that data, you would write the comp plan, right? And you would say, okay, what do we have in our comp plan right now? Okay, we only have 1972. Do we keep that or do we just update that? So you see where I'm going? Like they're supposed to be updating the actual information from the last comp plan. They're not doing that.
Shouldn't that be something that they do every so many years?
It should be every 5 years.
Every 5 years?
But if you're doing good comp plan, long range planning, you would look at it yearly.
Yeah.
You would look at it yearly. They probably haven't looked at it for 10 years, I'm guessing. So this is outdated information. And no planner is doing any of this work. So a professional planner should be doing this work. They should be presenting this research to you. And then you should, as the people, say, you know, what to do with it. But from that, you create goals and objectives and policies. That's how it's supposed to work. But right now, I don't really know what's going on here. Why would we remove a reference? Why would we not update with the new fall information? Definitely, we have new information since 1972. There's no doubt about that. So is anybody doing that research? That would be my question. And I'm guessing not.
Well, okay, these,
In the packet, there is a document from Department of Fish and Game.
I saw that.
And there's a reference that says we have reviewed the proposed Baldwin County comprehensive plan. Proposed revisions for hazardous areas and special areas. That suggests to me that they have done.
That's just Fish and Game. So Fish and Game is an agency. So one of the things you do as a planner is you go out to all the agencies in the area and you say, okay, we're going to update this chapter. Fish and Game, do you have anything to say about, theirs would be more about special sites rather necessarily than hazardous areas, although there is some overlap there. And so if you're doing your job as a planner, you go to all the agencies and not only do you just ask for their comment, you go to them and you say, this is what we're doing, and this is how I think it fits in. And do you have anything to say about
These
that?
are comments to Bonner County's
Yes.
proposed.
They should be incorporated into our comp plan. I think that's why Asia
So you're
includes
saying
this.
they make comments on a plan that doesn't exist?
No, they're making a comment on the update. So what the county is seeking to do is update their comp plan, right? Currently, this information, Fish and Game, is not in there. It needs to go in the new comp plan. That's what, who wrote this, Merritt? Carson. Whoever wrote this is saying this needs to go into this section of the comp plan.
Okay, so that's just their input.
That's their input, exactly.
I will add that there is a hazard in writing too much specificity into a guideline. That it automatically makes it sunset at some point because the data gets old. So if you can encapsulate the whole policy without that, it gives it longevity, gives it legs across the years. Okay, so because coming out of this will be some kind of a response. All it is identifying the situation. So whether it has the Newport fault zone in it or not, this section can still stand. Yes.
But, and one of the things about it, and I think what Asia's looking at doing, it's not totally removing that information, but it's taking it out of the comp plan, putting it into a reference area so that you can go back. So the comp plan is sitting there giving you your guidelines or them their guidelines, but there's other information. And I think the other thing that she's trying to do, from what we've chatted, is instead of just sending out an email to a department and asking for a response, she's trying to be more proactive. And instead of going, well, you know, so-and-so doesn't respond, so-and-so doesn't respond, trying to get more involved with the departments to say, hey, I really need your input. We need to have, you know.
May I add something?
Yes.
Was your name Merlin?
Yes.
Okay, I missed the introduction. Thank you so much for taking over this. That was very helpful.
Taking over any.
Yeah, question about somebody needed to do that, and I really appreciate that you did. I just wanted to clarify for the group. The planning commission has gone through these two chapters and several others, but today we're talking about hazardous and special areas. The planning commission has gone through those and made proposed recommendations, which are on this proposed side. And the current page there is what is existing right now in the comprehensive plan. So Asia has taken these and she's just showing you very quick clips of the hazardous areas. And she's saying, this is what's currently there. This is what they've proposed. And one of the reasons we're having this workshop now is because they continued the hearing. These recommendations from the planning commission went to the commissioners for a final decision. And at that hearing, Fish and Games letter had not been presented to the community or to the commissioners. And so, and then several other people spoke about issues that they were concerned about. So they decided to continue the hearing to a later date because those issues weren't addressed and to try to seek more input. So I don't know if that clarifies anything, but I think the slides will go through clips,
Right.
current and proposed right now.
Yeah.
And if you have thoughts on that, to be writing it down, sharing it, to be considered for the next hearing.
And I think it's important to point out that leaving, some people might be more comfortable identifying it like that. There is just a hazard in putting dated information into a policy or a guideline that gives it a sunset date. At some point, that's going to be old information. Now you got to change it. So if you can write it in a form that transcends comp plan to comp plan, makes it the updates a lot easier.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
Since this is being recorded, just, I don't know, they'll be able to make the next workshop where they might actually formulate the actual suggested changes that would, be discussed at the, I guess, February 22nd continued hearing. I think that's been the continued hearing in. It is, yes, February 22nd at 1:30. Yeah, but I think they're having a workshop before that, right? Yeah, February 9th. February 9th, there will be a workshop with the commission. And actually our planning staff at that one. But I guess I would recommend that someone from the planning staff and the county, contact the geologist just to answer this question. I mean, it seems to me like the faults would not go away, but if there is a fault, that we have to worry about an earthquake, it seems like an important thing to have in our policy. I mean, they can notice these things where there needs to be more.
I have to believe that would take place. This only says that summarizes this section with less historical data. And that's just for brevity and clarity. There you go. That's all I can say. All right, slope hazard. Steep slopes are potentially hazardous for several reasons. Obviously, gravity always works. I found out in my career, gravity never fails. So that's identified. Proposed is steep slopes are potentially hazardous for several reasons. Faster runoff of steep slope results in greater erosivity. Is that a word? Okay. They are a prerequisite for landslides to occur and rock fall is more likely. What they had, there's no specific section labeled for slope. Okay, so this sounds like a new section. The traditional viewpoint that landslides are restricted to extremely steep slopes and inhospitable terrain does not accurately reflect the real nature of the problem.
So excuse me, I'm just gonna stop for a second because the current, it says there's no specific section labeled slope. That's not true. The current comp plan I have in my hand right here and chapter 6 is called slopes. So
So it would be the recommended limit.
Yeah.
You would need to look at.
So
It should be.
but the current one is the current comp plan, right?
It is, but the proposed, I don't know where you read that.
Over here, current,
Slope impact is mentioned in landslides. I guess what this says.
And then now they're proposing it in this. They propose this.
So the rewording,
Or she
the
said-
rewording over here.
Are they thinking it in chapter 1 as a slope hazard, in chapter 6 as just a regular slope? Could that be the difference?
maybe, yeah. It's kind of hard to understand what the proposed changes are when you don't have them with the strikeout and red line and stuff, you
As an
normally.
agency, I can say this has been a constant difficulty in trying to understand which thing they wanted us to comment on exactly.
Well, if there's gonna be more iterations of this topic, I think it can get more refined as we go. This kind of feels like an introduction, like a 101 on all of this.
But the point about the red lines, so earlier in the process, those of us who have been following this for a number of months, there used to be versions online that had red lines that showed the changes. And those were removed, and now you have to take the old document and the new document and try to figure out exactly what.
Do we know why they removed them? Did they say?
I haven't asked, I just noticed.
It's just-
That makes it very difficult for the public to understand what's being changed.
Like our changes to law. They'll
Yeah.
underline the new law stuff and they strike the old, so you
Yeah.
can see it right there compared. to-
That's what's normally done when you change.
Well, that's an extra step. The decision makers usually wouldn't do that. I mean, they would do it amongst themselves, show the change, and then you make the change. See,
We used to,
but adding that, exposing that to the public is a great idea. Just an extra step in the process that they, more work that they have to produce.
Right, but it's an integral step because it's the people's document.
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah,
Makes
no,
sense.
and people are passionate about that, I
Yeah.
get that.
just for
It
the
just-
record,
What's that?
so just for the record, it's not an extra step in the situation because they used to be available online and now they're not. So it's an extra step to take them away.
I'm
Yeah,
kinda
that's
thinking-
true.
I'm kind of thinking globally,
Hmm.
that,
Yeah, this
this-
process of
that's
slide,
unique.
the process with the slides, it sort of removes some transparency.
Yeah.
And
Well, I think that.
it forces us to accept what the slides say without any real verification.
Well, the counter to that is that, I mean, Commissioner Williams called this workshop in an attempt to make things more transparent, and she distilled some information. But, you know, as our due diligence in preparation, we could go online and try to match up the old and the new documents, but.
She's just trying to streamline the process.
Yeah, she's trying to like, you know, create this opportunity for us to all give input, and it's in challenging situation because it's late in the process. And she's really like putting herself on the line to do this, and so I just want to express my gratitude about that, and granted, it's confusing to see it like this, yes.
So this here is saying that slope is a hazard in the hazard section, which is separate from the slope section that you're talking about in chapter 6.
I guess. It's good. I mean, your guess is as good as mine. I think maybe what they're trying to say, see, a lot of discussion went on with the planning commission, no doubt, to get to this point right here. So we're really just guessing at what they were doing, but that would be a good guess, I would say, is that, you know, the existing document has this section on slope, and they're maybe trying to integrate it into landslides, or is it the opposite
Well,
way?
Everything that Nathan has said since he ran for office has been about transparency and clarity. So I gotta believe that's walked its way into this presentation and how it's laid out.
Yeah.
Because I'm learning this is same time you are.
I think maybe the issue here, and I might be wrong, but the fact that somebody pointed this out, I think the point is that in here, it seems to assume that the only risk areas are over 29% in slope, but then you have this point of interest in the current plan that says there can be landslides in places that, you know, I don't know, it's suggesting that maybe it's not just over 29%, so it might be more complex than.
Right, and I think there was some stuff left out that you're now including. That they're bracketing slope in relation to landslide, in relation to rockfall, and painting a picture that's a little more uniform for nature and not just, you know, gobbledygook.
Well, one of the things to keep in mind as well, though, is that this comprehensive plan informs our zoning code, and the zoning code is the law, okay? This is not law. This is the vision of the people that creates the law. And slopes are mentioned in the law, which is the zoning code. So has the planning commission done their job in saying, you know, is the word slope mentioned frequently in the zoning code? Probably it is. I think what they use to justify, for example, rezoning. There's a lot of stuff about slopes in there. So I don't know if they've done their homework, so it's really hard to say, yeah, let's go with the proposed here. So I would say we need to know more information about how this relates to our law, our zoning code.
And by writing on the comment page and submitting it in is the way you do that. When you get that message across. So taking notes as we go along, for questions that you have. Might
Is this
generate.
The
more
comment page?
Yeah, get small, huh?
Yeah.
I looked for a couple extra pages underneath that. big black.
So maybe everyone put their name on this page and start making notes on it, and then I'll be submitted at the end. Okay.
Okay. All right, what causes landslide? I mentioned gravity's big deal, okay?
I know, me too.
So they got a proposed and the current compared here. And I guess currently it's in the informational section, not in the according to steep slopes saturated by water often accounts for landslides. Other causal factors for landslides include rapid snowmelt, earthquakes, vegetation removal, logging, fire, etc. Adding excessive weight to slopes. For consequently, the list of slope failure and landslides in Idaho, please visit the Idaho Geological Survey. Okay. Point of interest, landslides are known to occur both on land and underwater. They can, but they can't. They can't occur in bedrock or in soils, cultivated land. Barren slopes, natural forests are all subject to landslides. Both extremely dry areas and very humid areas can be affected. So that's what's currently in here. So does this read better? Is it kind of the point, I guess.
It does. I would add freeze, refreeze, freeze, unfreeze, refreeze.
Yeah, pretty qualified.
Landslides in Bonner County. Currently, the majority of the mass failures in Bonner County have occurred in the mountainous terrain away from populated areas. And then few failures have occurred. Department of Lands, most landslide areas generally have the following characteristics. And then it lists its characteristics. Proposing on the other side, in 1991, a severe flooding event occurred near the city of Sandpoint, carrying heavy loads of debris. The torrent's velocity damaged the roadway leading up to Schweitzer, leaving several dozen people stranded. The flooding also contaminated the city's water treatment facility, costing taxpayers several $100,000. Huh.
So I have a comment about this because I read this before we came. So first of all, you could keep this current and add to it with the proposed. And I would update the current with better, more modern language about geologically hazardous areas. And I would break it down per slopes is what I would do. And so as a planner, that should be updated, that should be researched and updated using, again, more modern language. And I think it really is good to inform the people how slope failures have affected the county. So the proposed, that's just one incidence of what's happened. You would want all of the incidents that, you know, that you could gather. And all of them.
And the conditions that may create the hazard.
Exactly.
Just a couple of examples.
And you want to know how the built environment is affecting the natural environment. That's what's missing in this particular. I'm putting it in my notes.
And I would think of that too is increased freeze and thaw, increases potential landscape and increased precipitation. And I don't think we're sort of, I don't know if that fits here or if it's in the data that goes with this section. Like if there's an appendix with the hazardous section, area section, but I think we've seen around the county increase, you know, with freeze and thaws of 60 degrees, like we saw, and then increased rain on top of snow, we're seeing more landslides.
I hope I'm not the only one that has trouble with this slide. Because this looks like justification over here, and this looks like education over here.
Yeah.
Okay, this is telling me the components of landslide or slope. This tells me why I do it. So I'm not sure exactly how that comes to play. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering too, why it mentioned Sandpoint's water supply, but it doesn't say anything about county water supply. What does the county comp plan have to do with the city water?
Right, it's very specific and localized, yeah.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like it's talking about the city of Switzer. It's a little confusing, but
This
it's
is an
talking
event.
about the Switzer event, which I don't know. Is it true? Oh, yeah,
No,
yeah.
That's what I was getting at. This is an event. This is educational. This breaks down, what a landslide can be composed by. Unstable, drainage issues, that kind of thing. This just tells me that something happened. So
Maybe it's not.
I'm not sure where they're going with that.
I have a question about that scenario. So you have a city water treatment facility we paid for, they got damaged. Would this comprehensive plan have affected that as being built or not? I suspect probably not. I suspect it was civil engineering that was the failure there.
Right.
It didn't account for the potential factors of this landslide. Really has nothing to do, in my mind, with citizens and our restrictions on our property with regard to what we can and can't build.
Well, I think it is relevant because I think it shows what happens when you build a road up a steep slope, and so we need to be considering slopes and landslides when we do development, because this is the kind of stuff that can happen. And to reiterate Barnaby's point over here, when you have more rain on snow events, you're going to have more opportunity, and more freeze and thaw, you're going to have more opportunities for these kinds of landslides to happen. So these are just examples of what's happened in the past and how it's impacted our community, whether you live in the city or not. I mean, actually, a lot of people use Sandpoint city water, and one reason they built a second water treatment plant was because they knew that the surface water system in the watershed was at risk of this kind of incident. And we have a lot of steep slopes that are particularly around Schweitzer, but this is just to educate us so that we know that when the zoning codes are developed, that there needs to be some kind of consideration for where development should go and what the standard should be in building roads. And so we don't have these kinds of things happen in the future.
And don't forget that this is going to, what follows from this, this exercise that is happening now with the body of the comp plan will be created policies and goals and objectives. Those policies and goals and objectives, which are very much missing from this process right now, are going to be what informs the law or the zoning code. And so, for example, we also don't want to keep paying for a road that's going to keep falling, right? So that's our tax dollars as well. And so maybe you would come up with a goal that says, our goal is to not keep paying for roads and to have civil engineering do it properly. And how do you do that based on the geology? Well, you're going to have to make them take more samples of dirt to see that where they should be building the road. So, for example,
professionals with the expertise.
Exactly.
Civil engineering decisions, and they really
it ties
don't
in.
belong in a plan to control.
you got it.
Okay, let's tie into this though, with
I just need to.
right
clarify
up
what
here in front, it says proposed. And this says current. So what's the consensus here? Is this one better than this one?
Oh,
Okay.
we have the examples
Of why?
to cover,
Because if this tells you, this gives you some measurement.
yeah.
Okay, if you have an objective, having it being measurable helps you to understand what you're reading
But it needs to be up there.
and what you're gonna do. So concise, measurable are all components of a good policy.
So just one point of clarification on what you just said is that they actually. The planning commission and the planning commissioners have gotten this process out of order from the beginning, and they've actually already approved the update to the goals, objectives, and policies. And so this is coming after the fact. This work should inform the goals, objectives, and policies. But we're going to have to, if we want the process to work in that logical order, we're gonna have to ask them to go back and redo the goals, objectives, and policies after we get the comprehensive plan. Right.
I agree, she's 100% correct.
One of the things with that, if you go with the proposed, you're not giving a plan or any guidelines, you're just telling them what has happened in the past. Again, yes, you need to keep that, whether it's in a reference area for somebody to go back and reference, but you need to have information. A bad word for a lot of people. I come from Southern California,
Over here, this is a what, that's a
Yeah.
what.
but the 57 freeway that was built through part of Diamond Bar, Orange County area. The engineers came in there and said, man, we can go ahead and we can cut the mountain to run the freeway through there. And within 3 years, they had a massive landslide that took out all the northbound lanes because it was not properly looked at by people that knew what they were doing. And they had subsequent 4 years of problems before they finally put concrete walls up. But it's just an indication of, exactly, you need to have it gone through. And this bit about having a developer come in and say, hey, planning department, this is what I want to do. And the planning department looks at, oh, well, we've had severe floods. And going by the proposed and not having a guideline to look at to be able to say, you know what, you need to have this, and this done so that we can eliminate or minimize. Because you can never totally eliminate.
How
But
old
you
enough
can
to know that
minimize.
nature always wins.
Yep.
Okay, that's just a given.
All right, I would say that left-hand side is like a validation of their goals that they've already done. But for any issue here, I mean, I can't think of it right now, but there's probably 100 different reasons you could claim on both sides. To why that might be an effective consideration, or it might not be. And so to list a whole bunch of incidents, if they all point in one result, obviously that makes sense. But if you can have contrary result from different incidences, it's a historical, it probably should be in the reference item in an addendum to something that's more generic. Because you can't list all of pros and cons of different incidents.
Well, and
We
you
go
get
with
some
remedy.
instances that's, you go to one of the local coffee clutches and 4 old guys are gonna have a different story on how that happened in 1991.
This could
So it's
have,
not factual.
this could have been a news.
It's all
clip out of a
interpretation,
newspaper.
basically. It's all interpretation. So as much as we can keep it as a fact, if it's going to become law, I say that should be an example of our facts. Yes.
So I just wanted to suggest that for everyone who did receive a packet at your table, I'm finding it really helpful to actually look at the printout of this section as we go through it, because it does give a bit more context and it makes more sense in this chapter, looking at it on the written page.
Okay, avalanche. Forest Service avalanche center generally occur on slopes between 30 and 45 degrees. More likely to occur on convex slopes. In general, slopes with thicker tree cover, the low hanging branches may help anchor snow. Other factors may increase the likelihood of an avalanche occurring, include south facing slopes and mountainous areas with higher elevations. Not really sure what the current chapter says. It details what is, what causes, and what are. The updated recommendations removes. I guess that removes what's currently. I'm not sure exactly. She would have to stand here and explain how that's going to play out. Avalanche risk assessment. Drawing on Loot Hole et al. 1996 risk assessment model. It was computed for Bonner County, it might be in your packet, using a weighted overlay analysis. Slope aspect, elevation were extracted. These components were combined to calculate potential avalanche risks for Bonner County. And then currently it says most avalanches occur in the backcountry, outside developed areas. Not operating hours, I kind of like this one better. Because this gives you reference material to go back and find more information that this doesn't share. Just a thought.
Again, it's the same thing though, is that you need the background information about what are avalanches, how do they occur, where do they happen? And then, you know, the proposed is also good. I think they're both.
Well, that's, but it referenced a study. Okay, so that would be an addendum in the back, I guess. So this proposal leads you somewhere. This doesn't seem to do so much.
Oh, so you don't have the whole, just so you know, you don't have the whole proposed right there, up there. You have to look in the packet to see the proposed, because there is something that reads a little bit like the current. So just so you know, you have to look at the, is it December 6th? That's, yeah. This December 6th one, and then you go to page 4. And if you look at it, there's a lot more, so this isn't showing even, you know, half of what is actually proposed, I don't think, because.
No, I think, and I don't think the purpose of our workshop is to drill down and get how many angels we need on a pin. And this is topically just an awareness, you know.
Yeah, under avalanche risk assessment in the new one, in the recommendation.
Right, there is something there, yeah.
That's all that's there is the under risk assessment.
So then we get into
It's that, but it's
liquefaction.
They took the other out.
Oh, they took 1.3 out?
No, they took, will you go back to the last slide real quick? Oh, no, one more forward. See where it says current 3.2,
Yeah,
that was under risk, avalanche risk assessment.
and they just took it and put it here at 1.3.
No, they didn't put it there at all.
It's out.
Oh, it's gone, okay.
That's what was there in the current one, and what's proposed is what they proposed. And that is what it says in this recommendation.
And what it seems to me that Commissioner Williams did with this slideshow is to call out the sections with the most significant changes. To just bring them to our attention, not to present to make comprehensive.
Right.
One comment on that last one, they're citing something for 1996 for avalanche as a risk assessment. And there are other factors that can be impacting the risk assessment of this kinds of application. There needs to be looked at that. That's over. We're looking at how many years ago.
There's most certainly more updated information about avalanche risk.
And especially for
Absolutely.
Bonner County, I think to hang our hats on something that's from 1996.
Yes.
And I would, if you are making notes, you plan on turning them in, and you know someone who is skilled and educated in avalanches. I would write that person's name down and their contact information so that they can be contacted about a specific topic of specialty. Kevin Davis.
Von Howard should have all the hazards.
Okay, liquefaction. No substantive changes to this section. So there's no difference between that.
Should this section of soils that are susceptible to liquefaction? Yes, I think the answer to that is yes.
Absolutely, which would be wetland soils.
That's a good point. I mean, it's not something that you see every day, except on maybe the National Geographic Channel or something like that. Okay. Community input on chapter 1, sections 1.1 through 1.4. We talked about faults, slopes, avalanche, liquefaction, and miscellaneous. So you got some nuggets that you can write down. I'm sure Asia would really appreciate collecting that.
Write down the nuggets.
I'm
This is the
sorry.
message. No, it's good. Really good.
I'm not a deep thinker, okay, so I live on nuggets.
That was not a.
All right. Proposed intro, historical introduction has been updated.
Oh, this is your section.
Currently, general discussion with historical data dating back to 1910.
That's important because the 1910 fire radically changed the entire.
Well, it's one thing that everybody that I know loves, it's history. Okay, they revel in that stuff, so when you take it out. You know, they throw the yellow flag and they call foul. So this is about wildfires. And you know, wildfires is near and dear to my heart, so historical data matter. But the way we fight fires today is not like how we did in 1910.
Are there any fire experts in the room other than yourself?
More firefighters? Nah, I'm used to that.
So what do you think about the fire protection section here? 2.2.
I haven't had a chance to read it. There's something in there that jumps out at you.
I'm just reading down also.
I came from a municipal fire department. When they had money. And they had, well, city of Sacramento. So it's the oldest paid fire department west of the Mississippi. And so we always ran with 4 firefighters on it as a crew going down the road. What scares me here is that I see one guy going down with a vehicle all by himself and maybe 2. So I know that whatever they get to when they get there, they can't do what they're potentially capable of without additional units getting thrown in there. And so anyway.
So I see this section under fire protection, talking about the 100 to 200 foot buffers around dwellings. In order to enhance fire safety when you live out in the forests. I think it would be interesting or important to also include information about, you know, the challenges, the risks that individuals undertake when they choose to locate their homes in high fire risk forested areas, and perhaps a mention of the wildland urban interface. And yeah, the challenges and the pressures that puts on fire safety officers when we allow this first sort of
The,
placement of.
does that say
homes.
100 to 200?
It says 100 to 200 foot buffer area around a dwelling and.
The
its
100,
immediate-
the 100 foot is, that's a defensible space, so that I can come in with a fire engine and get between the fire and your house, okay? If you don't have that, if you have trees hanging over the top of your house, I can tell you that you just look at it and say, well, that's a loser, and you go over to this house. Because, you know, typically on these wildfires and downtown, you saw, you know, the fire down there on First Street. You just say what you can. I mean, given the resources that you have, and so it's a dance. Do I have enough resources to do what I know I want to do? And so that's what the county is supposed to do, is be able to address. But the 100 foot is going to identify as a measurement that a homeowner and the fire department can agree upon as a space away from the house to take some action to save that house. Outside of that, it's Mother Nature. You got a 25 mile an hour wind, it doesn't care, it doesn't matter if you got a 2,500 foot distance. You're still gonna have a problem.
Because Paradise Valley is a good example of that.
Yeah,
So there's just, again, information missing from this section. So for example, it's talking about the fire districts within Bonner County. It's also talking about wildfires. I know it as 2 separate, you know, there's the wildland firefighters, right? That's a different.
no, they're all cross trained.
Okay, so that's not made clear in here. It's also not made clear in here that in Bonner County, it's all volunteer, right? Mostly,
No.
it's mostly volunteer, right?
It's mixed. It's mixed.
It's mixed, but how many firemen did you say are going to be going, like, let's say Walmart's on fire?
Well, I'm just saying, as from a firefighter's perspective, that when I see one guy driving down with a fire engine, I'm concerned about his safety. Not the work he has to do.
Right.
But his personal safety.
Right.
And what city and county leaders, their responsibility is to make sure that they have what they need.
Yeah, and I'm not making a judgment about that. All I'm
I
saying,
would expect that
Yeah.
information to be in there.
it should be in there
That's more
because,
how-to thing.
well, no, what needs to be in there is a full picture of how fires are fought here so that you can make good goals, policies and objectives. So if you don't have the full story and data about how fires are fought, then you can't have good policies.
Well, then, no,
And
and to the extent I agree with you, but when you go into operational issues versus administrative issues, then you tie the hands of the responders. Because if they don't follow exactly what's in there, then they're up to criticism.
Exactly opposite of that. You wouldn't go into operational issues and say firefighters must do X, Y, Z. You're saying, here's what our firefighters do right now. And then you might even talk to all of the fire chiefs and say, what do you need that you don't have? And you can create policies and goals from that so that they can do what they want.
But okay, just like law enforcement has police officer standard training, fire department has the same thing.
Yeah, I'm not
So
talking
those-
about training. I'm not talking about training.
Well,
I'm
that
talking-
goes into operations.
No, I'm just talking about information. There's 10 fire departments. At any given time, there will be one person on staff. This is how our operations go. This is so that if you move into Bonner County, you can read the comp plan and go, this is how fires are fought.
You can, well, if you write it that way, you can change it every month, because it's gonna change every month.
I'm looking here at the Bonner County Wildfire Protection Plan online, so it says 2016, and we do have, this is where how some of these things intermingle is what people I think want clarity on. I mean, clearly, we've got this whole plan in place where we're assessing hazards, we're talking about the profile, we're talking about mitigation, plan making, there's a whole group of this bonfire, it's whoever here, fire mitigation manager of Bonner County. I mean, there is information here that a person could get. And what you're wondering is what kind of maybe to pull from existing, it seems like we have a lot of existing information.
Just general information needs
Just
to
put
be.
into this, so it's.
How big do you want that comp plan? Specifics, you don't really, and I know you're not saying specific, but sitting there saying for a planner to look at, be able to say, okay, and I'm gonna use the Dom project out in Bay and all. The fire chief for Spirit Lake, because there was only one road entering that property, said he would not send any of his equipment or firefighters onto that property with only one point of egress. Now, something like that needs to be, but more specific, if it's a separate thing that the planning department could be able to pull out to give to the developer or to be able to research would be better than having, a 1,000-page book to go through. And I think that's sort of that you've got your basic, and then I have more detail to go into.
You do the 30,000 foot flyover in the comp plan. So you just say there's 10 fire departments, they're staffed by XYZ, boom, done. And then while land fires are fought by whoever they're fought by, done. Here's how they interact, done.
Yeah.
It's a page, it's this, but this is missing some of that information is all I'm saying.
Well, something that's new to this area is you heard of the JPA, Joint Powers Agreement. Okay, that linked Sable with Sandpoint with West Side into a joint powers agreement. That's different than a merger. And so you have a cooperative effort amongst those communities to supply and back up other departments and share resources. So that's called a force multiplier. That if you have a big fire in Sandpoint, West Side, and say will come in and help, and then you have also a mutual aid agreement with North Side come in. That's how the system works, right? So
That's great.
there's a caution in trying to write anything that hamstrings the opposite, the fluidness and the flexibility of these other agencies that are all already working.
I know what I want to do them.
No, and I'm sure you would. But it can happen by accident, because the tendency for people to want to be too specific. Is sometimes overpowering, because they get passionate and like, well, I gotta write it in there.
So.
That's-
And on that point, I would say that there are also small communities that are developing their own volunteer.
Yes.
Fire. Protections. For instance, over in the Gilroy area. And, there needs to be an understanding too, that that's all part
But
of
that ends up in
the system.
the fire world,
Yeah.
the response plan, the dispatch that goes out. They're identified, they're bona fide, identified, and they get dispatched. Volunteer fire departments, it's tough. Because the level of training required for a firefighter now has risen to a level that a guy having a regular job. Has a tough time maintaining and achieving. And to be asking a person to drop their tool belt, and go out because they got paged to a fire. That's a big chunk to ask anybody. So it's an ongoing problem that requires constant attention. Yes.
Do you have a recommendation about how it would most appropriately include the idea of Bonner County's wildland urban interface areas in this document?
I think you'd have to defer to the subject matter experts.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I'm asking.
Right, and so if you craft a message that takes it out of the comp plan and puts it into the fire administration, then you have a clean line of authority that ties everything together. Okay,
So is there a statement that would be appropriate?
I'm sorry.
Is there a statement that would be appropriate about that concept?
I'd
of
have,
this plan?
I have to sit down and scratch my head and figure out the right way to say that.
Would you do that?
I'm sure it's probably sitting in there somewhere.
No,
Well, I think you might be talking
That
about
never
a policy
seen.
or goal too, so we don't want to get into policy and goals. This is just the main.
no, I'm just talking about the concept of what is our situation in Bonner County right now, in regard to development near populated areas and how that interface zone looks.
I would say, as things stand today, because I go to all the JPA meetings I can handle, because I like to listen to their budget breakdown. That retention and recruitment is paramount, because the way firefighting works is people. Right, you can have the shiniest, newest agent in Parker, but you got nobody to run it. It's just pretty. Okay, and that doesn't satisfy the needs of the community. So recruitment, retention, community outreach, you mentioned volunteers, those are your neighbors, right? Okay, so they come out to help each other, and that's the way it always used to be that way. It was only in that the standards of training was so high that you had to pay anybody. So I think that's the direction that it needs to go for the present. Yes, ma'am.
So 3 things. I've been married to a wildland firefighter for 24 years. So
I'm sorry.
By extension, and I know every since retired and all those requirements, but yeah. One thing that's not mentioned in this section is the expansion of the fire season. For one thing. Because we are seeing longer fire season. Anybody who's been living here, we've definitely seen, or even in California, it used to be fire seasons around the north, southwest, or the west, which is only the period of time. As we know now, we're almost 12 months a year. And then the other thing is that what's not really mentioned in this plan is that there are areas of the county, south of this lake. There are areas that are outside of these fire districts, so people can build outside these fire districts. And they may expect that they're going to get response, but that is not necessarily true. Those 10 districts do not cover every aspect of this. So I think we need to identify that there are, that these fire seasons are getting longer. And that we are seeing areas that aren't being covered.
Well, fire season's scientific. And there's numbers you can apply to when it starts, and most of these big fires, they don't go out until October, the first snows. Okay, that's just
No, I'm
reality.
very well aware of that.
Okay,
I know that.
the other thing is that because Idaho had so much federal land, Bureau of Land Management, Indian reservations, that kind of thing. The line of authority for firefighting changes with all of those. Okay, so what we're talking about on a county basis, we tie into our federal and state partners and.
But
address
there
the
are
issue.
houses that are, you know, up in, I know houses that are burned down because they up north, because they are outside of the district. And so that's one of the things that maybe needs to be clarified is that not every house that goes in Monroe County is within the fire district.
So like it's, and it ties into if someone comes in with a land development subdivision application and it's outside of fire district. I mean, that's something.
Just because you live in a fire district doesn't mean your house won't burn down.
Yeah.
Okay?
No, I know, but I'm just
Okay,
saying.
so boundaries,
What,
boundaries and fire don't care.
yeah,
And so as a talking point, it's not really relevant, that you try and narrow it down and put a pin on a map and say that this is safe and that's not.
Well, but
I think from my.
That's why you have fire
experience
insurance.
working in the field with people who are moving here from elsewhere, I hear these types of comments where. You know, they're involved in a land development project that maybe went through without any consideration of any of this, but in their mind. They're coming from a place where there are resources closer and they really don't, you know, I mean, so it's more just, you know. I think the point of this, it's like what she was saying for people to have this overriding image of. What are the general available resources in Bonner County? And then where is the development happening?
I mean. When I worked for FEMA, I got dispatched, a planning section sheet, to Malibu. Okay. I drove all through Malibu. Now, if you recollect, Malibu came right after Paradise, California. Where the whole community got burned down. Okay, not unlike where we live right here. And I could drive down there and look at this mansion. People that got all the money in the world, got the best home anywhere, and that house was burned to the ground. This one was not. That house burned to the ground. This one not. The fickleness of nature allowed that to happen. In Paradise, it just went laterally. And there's not enough firefighters in the world. Because if you think of all the resources California's got, they still couldn't stop it. Okay, and it happened in Sonoma County, it happened in Paradise, California. So respecting to the writing and how it's you identify it and address it, but don't override it. It's different.
Yeah, I think it's covered, because in like proposed section 2.2, it says. Bonner County is currently served by 10 fire districts. However, many properties in Bonner County fall outside of fire district protection zone, which means that fire services are not readily available for anyone. That said, Idaho code, they can, you know, they can sign off. The proposed change covers that. Plus, I think it's the homeowners or home potential home buyers' responsibility to do their due diligence and am I covered? You know, if I have a fire, what is?
Right.
I think that, again, though, it ties back into this is a community comprehensive plan. So if you've got a new neighborhood of a whole bunch of parcels in an area that is like impossible to reach, then fine, that's fine, not saying not to do it. But that should be considered as we approve different projects moving forward, because it's not just those individual people, it's now what are we spending to respond to them in whatever capacity.
Well, there's the International Fire Code, and which is the marching orders the fire chief would use for any development. So the engineering and infrastructure that goes in place for a community like that looks for that sweet spot. Okay, you don't want to overbuild and you don't want to underbuild. Okay, so what's that sweet spot? And that's what it goes into a community plan.
Yeah, which is what he's talking about when you have things where it doesn't have ingress or egress, even if they wanted to respond, could they, you know, just.
But the reason is different. Yes. The reason is that I won't put a fire crew on a dead end road that they can't turn around and get out.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of like, that's opposite.
And part of that, you have to be careful how much you write into it. We all know, and that's one of the reasons why we're having problems with the comp plan, is we're developing. You know, all that farmland that's, you know, the plains that are gone in Kootenai. You know, development's going to happen. You were talking about a fire, they're trying to start a volunteer fire department and all. So you can't do specifics. Some of that should be up to the developer unless you've gone out and bought the property to build. But if it's a development, part of it should fall back on the developer to make sure that everything's done, and especially if you're outside a fire district or a covered area. You were at the CERT training on Friday, when I was. Two of the gentlemen got called out that were volunteer firefighters. There was a fire down in our area. There were, for a manufactured home, there were 15 or 16 engines that were there, along with 3 fire chiefs from different departments. Spirit Lake doesn't have that many. They had to call in mutual aid from all the surrounding areas that could provide a unit to help maintain, because had it taken off into the fields, it would have gone into forest lands, and who knows how many more homes would have been destroyed. So, you know, and I agree, we have to have something, but yet on the other hand, you know, like you said, we don't want to do too much where we're tying the hands, but we have to have enough, again, for somebody in planning to be able to look at and go, all right, hey, this is what you're gonna have to do. And again, I will reiterate communication that we have the departments respond back.
Emergency services in general are always behind growth. Okay, you don't build a fire department, you don't build a police department in advance of the growth. Okay, so you're always playing catch up. Right, I can stand here and tell you all kinds of stories, and you know, fire doubles every minute. So time is of the essence. So if you want to look at one aspect of a fire response, look at response time. How long did it take to get that resources there to go to work? Okay, because that tells you whether or not what you're going to say.
But again, this gets into the minutia. We're getting into the minutia of goals, objectives, and policies. This is just the meat. This is just the information that informs what we will create as a goal, policy, or objective. So as an example, you might say, you know, here's the fire districts, here's the wildland fires, this is who fights what. And then you might put in average response times. These response times will change based on, you know, data that comes in on a yearly basis. And then maybe your goal, for example, this is, I'm not saying we should ever do this, but you know, people don't want to be overregulated here. So that's where we should be coming in, as the goals, policies, and objectives. But as an example, maybe the places that are outside of fire districts, one goal would be to encourage people to build sprinklers into their homes. Encourage. Now, can you even do that with a well? I don't even know. But I'm just giving you an example of what we could do, because the comprehensive plan is here to mitigate hazards, right? That's part of why it's here.
That's my point. We're not here. I understand that you can have a hazard in any, it doesn't matter how populated it is, but the fact is that risk levels do increase if it's completely out of anybody's reach or whatever. And so you're just saying, here's the thing, you're in this zone, you're outside of a fire district. Maybe you can consider these types of things to protect yourself. I mean, it's on you.
Yeah.
So it's more just having an awareness of where these developments are happening, and then what people should know about it, because
Well, I
people,
think in terms of the comp plan, you need to identify your partners. Okay,
yeah.
so a simple annotation that addresses more information to the fire boards or the districts or the fire administration or the sheriff department or the Bonner County EMS. All those partners that are implicit in our community is a way of getting out of this section and making it workable.
And then last but not least, I don't know how you can have a discussion about fires without having a discussion about water availability. So that's missing. Like, don't you fight fires with water?
Okay. You're getting an operational thing, because what they do, they.
No, I'm not. I'm
But you
all I'm
are.
saying generalities.
Okay. if
What's
I
the water bill
put it
be for fire? That's it.
in, And if it's a subdivision and you want to put an underground hydrant system, and that's doable for the subdivision, but trying to put an underground hydrant system on the side of a mountain because somebody wants to build out there, it's gonna work.
I'm not saying do
So
that. I'm saying.
the operational solution of that is that the fire department responds with enough water to put out X amount of structure.
And where do they get the water from? And that's all.
They carry it with them.
Yeah, so that's all. I'm saying.
Helicopter.
You just have to have a discussion about it in here in the general data.
Tankers.
Okay, 2.1 proposed. Wildfires threaten wildlife ecosystem, residents and property. So the general steeper slopes facing south increase the fire risk of the fact that this is exactly what we're talking about. What's currently on here, contributing factors, you got 5 bullet points. So which one do you like better? Okay, it's an either or thing. Does this more clearly lay out your position on wildfires? Or do you like this? Up and down and white. Okay.
There's your water. Yeah.
Yeah. I think as a statement,
It's easier to
or
read on the right.
so assume that everybody reads this as an informed reader. Does this help them more than this? Just saying. Okay. Suburban wildland interface area was eliminated. Okay, currently, historical data dating back to 1970. And it illustrated a suburban wildland interface area, I guess. You know, right now it's assumed. Because like I pointed out before, firefighters are equally capable of wildfires and structure fires. Okay, we don't have this separation really anymore. And the way they approach it, and call them mutual aid resources, air assets, that kind of thing. So it's be in the comp plan, be simple to write a statement that just punts it to the fire administration and use their documentation to back up the comp plan. That makes sense.
So just so you know, what would be, I guess they'd be getting rid of the current 4.3. In that it says an interface area is an area where suburban development abuts wildland. The following list outlines techniques for land development that assist in the prevention of the spread of wildfire. Good street sign, reduced fire department response time, address of visibility is critical in speeding fire department. Response time, subdivision signs are critical in locating homes within the wildland suburban interface area, and then a huge bullet list of things. That's so it's just not really showing you what's gonna be deleted, I think. Just wanted to make that, because I've got a copy of it existing here. I don't think there's a copy of it.
There's not a place in the county that doesn't satisfy, right?
I do think though that it's critical to have that concept in the comprehensive plan when you look at, say, communities like Paradise in California, that got obliterated, but if there have been.
Well, they have a comp plan.
I'm not challenging their comp plan. I don't know anything about their comp plan. I'm just saying that there needs to be acknowledgement of a need to create a space where it's a defensible community in these populated areas.
Especially because we're building more subdivisions next to wildland areas.
Well, is that something to take note?
And I think that can be a link. And not be fully outlined in the comments.
Yeah.
But I meant to completely delete wildland.
No,
Yeah.
and I have some recommendations from someone familiar with fire. And One is that there's a wildland urban interface, WUI. And there's a description for that here, look, and that should be included because most rural resident lands are within the WUI. Is that a document that you're aware of?
Well. See,
Instead of
as
that
a
term,
representative here, my problem with adding that, I have no problem taking it out. Because Bonner County, there's no distinction between residential and interface with wildland interface. The way that the county is oriented and the areas that we're talking about, it's all interface, all of it. I don't know, maybe downtown Sandpoint would be an example where it's not, wildland interface.
What about forest land that isn't developed and agricultural land that isn't developed? That's not part of the interface area. You wouldn't
The
manage
interface
that.
refers to the movement from a municipal setting like downtown Sandpoint
Yeah.
to a rural setting like Sully Valley up there,
Yeah.
or any other.
That transition zone, that buffer.
Yeah,
zone.
there's a nuance
Yeah.
that they're identifying the general area.
I think it's.
My point is that pretty much all of Bonner County is a wildland interface area, so
But it's
it'd be
not.
redundant to continue to try and create a chapter and say it over and over and over again. Because it's everywhere.
I'm not saying a chapter, I'm saying like we mention it in this wild.
Paragraph, maybe like a short paragraph about what it is and how it differs to live next to a wildland area as opposed to in the middle of Sally Valley. That's all, just a paragraph. Just to distinguish between, maybe you have transition zones. And maybe that would help the firefighters. All of this is to help the firefighters fight fires more effectively.
And keep people safe.
Because part of what you will be informing is, again, the goals, policies, and objectives, and that's where the funding comes in if you need funding. That's where funding comes in. If the people want to fund that, it's up to them.
Well, I'll tell you, 36 years of firefighting, I never read a comp plan, so I retired. And so, yes, we try to be successful every time. Somebody dials 911, by God, we're gonna be successful. And that's kind of like what they do. And so what they write in the document is to keep the administrators straight. That's what their job is.
We're all the same page.
That's the important thing in how you write this, is that the administration has some marching orders. Some solid ground to stand on for the things they do. All right, wildfires, catalyst, fire protection, miscellaneous. So in as much as the notes you take down, if there's things that brought up, capture it, and we'll see what Asia does with it for the next. Floodplains, FEMA map. The implementation of construction and development standards are the most effective way to reduce future flood losses. And if you're not a contractor around here, you build a house that doesn't have to contend with a FEMA flood map. Not in this area. And that can determine how high your foundation is, cost, everything. Current 5-year, 105-year 100 plan, locations, insurance rate map, Bonner floodplain map, occurrence of frequencies, river lake flood, urban flood, flash flood, and then flood control structure. But I think what they're doing here is this is the introduction. And this is an introduction. This looks more like a table of contents. This is more like a statement of fact. So I'm not sure.
There's a lot missing from both of those, by the way. If you compare the two, you're looking at pages and pages of stuff.
Well,
so.
this kicks it to FEMA. Okay, where this one has insurance rate maps and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yes,
Sorry, just a minute, but is it supposed to say flood plain instead of flood plain?
Yeah, it's okay. It's funny.
Okay.
is that a typo?
Yeah, it's what I'm.
Just by the way, it is standard to have insurance rate maps as information in a comprehensive plan. That's not uncommon. And all it is, again, is general information for the public. That's all it is. Are they needed? Not necessarily, because I think every planning department is required to keep them. So you could always go check them, but it's just hard to make any determination here when. I mean, this is, 2 full pages of stuff, and that's just showing us a couple of.
Well, it's
Three
proposed,
courses.
this is a proposed intro. So I think there's some planning, this introduction statement for this one. Anybody else read it that way?
Well, it's not in the document. That's all the document. Right hand. column.
That's not in the document.
Yeah, it actually. is. But-
Yeah, so if you look at that,
I mean, like,
each one of those bullet comments has a paragraph. And,
Yes.
and things, so, I mean, that's just the. Edified
What page?
version of what's in the current plan, it's not the whole,
No, you're probably looking at the existing, right?
the existing, yeah.
Yeah, the
I'm-
existing.
I'm just starting to figure out how this thing is.
Yeah, that's right. Each one of those, there are no numbers in the existing. There's just like, for example, there's an underlined 5.1 section is called locations. And then another one that doesn't have a number is called flood insurance rate map, on and on. So on and so forth.
Okay,
So it's just saying, get rid of all of these sections in the existing and replace with,
that's, yeah, you're right, that's what it looks like, huh?
Yeah.
Well,
Floodplain and then miscellaneous.
yeah.
That's right.
May I go back to the wildfire just for a second?
Of course.
Ask you a question. I lived in Raleigh for years. And one of the sort of phenomena that was obvious was more people were moving into the building in the wildland urban interface than anywhere else in the country. And so the whole notion of the wildland urban interface was well developed. So I guess I have 3 questions. The first one is I'm not understanding. I understand that Bonner County is like following the wildland urban interface, and it's not like Ravallo County where you have the forest that playing this. But it's my understanding that the whole concept of wildland urban interface is well developed, and for example, the insurance industry is using it to make decision as to whether or not they were being able to provide mortgages to people as they move through this area. So
So not more than the insurance.
insurance, right? Well, you can't get a mortgage if you can't get insurance, right? So they were both kind of linked together. So I'm not understanding why that would be wrong. The whole concept.
Because the difference without a distinction. That because of the topography of Bonner County. Is that it's pretty hard anywhere in the county to stand alone. Okay, I'm in the wildland area. Okay, I'm in the urban section.
Yeah, the follow-up is, the Forest Service, came up with kind of basically to log the entire county. Because of this mitigation, the law with most of the mitigate this risk. So the movement of people into the wildland urban interface had like the implications for mortgage and insurance. But it also was the justification for the Forest Service to do this massive logging. So it seems like those things are interrelated. And I'm not sure how to tease it out.
Logging is used as a remediation of the fire act. Well, they're part of their so out of like certain areas is to create a zone that doesn't allow total control of the
But I think one of the things that the county did was to provide a fund for people to tap into that allowed them to do fire mitigation. So I'm not sure if that's something that our county could do.
This county, I mean, on our, we have this bonfire website, and it's talking about this movie thing, and they're talking about grants coming from all these different sources, and. I mean, there's clearly other work happening that's outside of this plan that's specific fire, so.
You know, most states have a fund that you can tap into for fire insurance, and you can't get anywhere else. FEMA does the same thing, it's called FIMA. Okay, and that's where you get your flood insurance when no one will give you insurance. And so the fact that insurance exists allows these people the comfort to go out there and build, because okay, I'm insured, right? It doesn't really answer the question whether or not we should be out there at all.
But is that something
It's America.
that the county can do, and it's something that is that we can build into the post policy?
Well, I'll answer on bonfire. Bonfire is set up that, and they only have so much money, and mostly through grants in Butler County. And they are a projected 5-year goal of going into particular areas. Last year, they went to 10 different small federal lands to clear out and struggle the undergrowth and to trim up trees and take out stuff. The gentleman that was in charge of that a number of years ago, when I had spoken to him, he talked about coming out when they were in our area and being able to use some of that funding to help take out stuff that we had on our property and some of the other neighboring properties, because he had the equipment there. The new gentleman that is in charge of it, when he came out to look at our property again, because he had no record, he said, we won't touch it. His opinion, you guys fall within the acceptable range of. So some of the programs, yes, you might be able to do it. If you're going to subcontract for somebody, it's very expensive on that. And I know county is, limited on funds. And certain things are able to be done, with assistance from the county, but something like that, it's not.
And with a comp plan, we're not looking to be so specific. We're trying to build a plan that can have some room for growth. We're just trying to be more specific on, in general, is there, for example, something that we should be including after your discussion on this particular section that was absent? In more of a general way of consideration based on what the definition of the section is. That's what, because if we're very specific, then next year we'll have to update the comp plan and we'll say that it's out of date. So we're looking to see if there is something that reasonably we could be including that would have a little bit of more ability to withstand a couple of years before we have to update it again. I know Matt likes updating it every year. He's gonna do all that work. So first I have to say thank you for your patience and my absence and accepting the challenge of giving your input on these sections. So is there any input that you feel we should be submitting for this particular section on floodplains? Or do we feel like that was mostly addressed in the recommended update?
Well, I'm just wondering if, I don't feel like I can analyze that, here today, and I'm just wondering what opportunities there are to provide that input on these chapters after.
That's
today.
why I put my card here, because it is hard to think that you could give that. Just shoot an email and copy planning. And if you want to have me as a contact as well, you can do that too, and make sure that they hear the concern, because the hope is that we're giving objective information that is supported, so that when we get an answer from planning as to why it's included or not included, that the answer is objective and addressing a specific issue and concern, not just a no. Like, for example, we moved on one of the chapters on historical sites. The prior plan said we had 33 options, but the current plan says there's 0. And so the question was, how did we go from 33 possible to 0? That's a reasonable question to ask and expect a very specific answer from the planning department as to why that change happened, because you don't actually see the why the change happens. So you can definitely shoot me an email. This section is being worked on. And the reason we tried to expedite the workshop was we're going to rehear these 2 sections in 3 weeks from that January 11th hearing. So if you have a thought, you can send it to me before then. And be specific to chapter, which section that you're on, so that I can just send it directly or you copy it directly to Jake.
So when would we need to get these comments to you?
By February 22nd, that's when this was reset. So this
You don't
issue,
need it like a week in advance, so you have time to incorporate, think through.
I'm not gonna give a smart aleck comment on that. If you get it to me before that date, then I will look through it. And Jake, because in that hearing, that question should be answered before we move forward, even if it's we considered that input. So unfortunately, we have to answer.
And then where do we find the goals, policies and objectives, the current ones that are adopted? Where do we find those?
So on the planning website, there is a section, if you click on comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
So when you click on that, it'll show you all of the goals and objectives, and then each section, and it'll actually show you, this is the current one, and then it'll do the suggested amendments also, and then the final amendment that's submitted to, but you have to look under the current file. I'll try and bring it up for you.
Because when I looked for what we were doing today, I didn't see the goals, policies and objectives together with this information. Like what are we currently operating under, for example?
The definition of hazardous, you mean the section that we're on, or what the goal?
No, I mean, our current comp plan right now, we have new goals, policies and objectives for this chapter, correct? That have been adopted already.
They didn't put that into the update. That wasn't what was at review on the January 11th. This is the part that was up for review.
Right, but they already adopted them, correct?
Correct.
They are on the website. They're on the website. Are they within our comp plan? Are they right within it? Or are they a totally separate document?
There's a new page and it is really helpful. But you can also just go to current project and just see the hazardous and what they're talking about today, but this is the new page.
And so you can see this is what we have had currently, and he's showing you the dates.
Adopted updates.
But see, like with the hazardous area especially, where are the goals, policies and objectives that we're currently operating under? It should be on the current, right?
Well, that could be added.
No, that's separate.
It's separate.
They segregated
So if
it
you want to read our comp plan right now, then you have to go
Correct.
to the comp plan. And then you need to go up here to the top there to know what the goals, policies and objectives are, right? That's how we currently have to read our comp plan. Is that right?
Correct. It doesn't show you, it's not the ease of read that shows you what your objectives are for that particular section. Because then they would have to put it on each individual section, the goals. So they're asking you to look at that like after your table of contents section.
So can you go up to where we would find the goals policy? So isn't it right? How would we know which one, like if I want to find the goals, policies and objectives, which would inform me when I'm looking at these sections to see, how I want things to change there.
There we go, the implementation.
But which one of those do we know? I have
This
to go
is-
through all of them.
So this one is the adopted one.
This is just one, okay.
So is this what you're looking for?
I guess, does it have all of them? All of them?
This is all of, yes,
Okay.
this has all of it for these sections.
Okay.
So it is, and I think this was done so that you could kind of parse out what you were looking for as you're following the comp plan update. And so that also allows them to get this part through the planning process, so that then when they go to the hazardous section, they've already identified the goals and policies. Is that an accurate way of explaining it, Matt?
Yeah, but because they have done it cart before the horse style, and they've already decided on, normally you you look at the meat of what it is, you get all the data, you gather it, and then you come up with the goals, policies, and objectives. So because they've done that backwards, I would recommend to people to go and read these goals and objectives and policies while you are making comments about this, because those might need changes.
That's a good
In
point.
fact, they probably will need changes.
That's a good suggestion. And that's what having a workshop helps you with, is having to pull the knowledge from the community members of what might be more helpful. Yes, George.
I want to congratulate you on being elected.
I'll say thank you tomorrow.
Like this, where there's actual community engagement. Since that wasn't the case so far, one of the comments that I made in one of the meetings was that all of this we scrapped. And that we start over with our and the planning department being given a budget, hire a professional to guide this process so that we wouldn't have this back and forth. So so a general question is, can this be scrapped and can we start over and do it in a more thoughtful way, guided by a professional?
I second that.
Well, I asked, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, it's your workshop.
Well,
It's the
I know,
community.
I asked that at the meeting they had.
Right.
And I was told by Jake of planning and that there's no money for that.
Yeah, they just hired a deputy director.
And I'm going, so.
How's that
I
possible?
know how much my property taxes been up.
Yeah.
There's money out.
Unfortunately, the answer that was given at that meeting left the people feeling, and I'll just to be clear, like there was something to be desired, because his answer in full was, that's what the county wanted to do, should have done, but we're all that you've got. And that doesn't make a community feel like we have, because we have people on our planning commission, our zoning commission with a lot of knowledge about this area that are guiding the comp plan, but it is being parted out. I didn't recall understanding that it wasn't going to be the planning director and that group making it from when we did the rehire of a new director. And so I did ask for clarification, and I did ask to get the list of the individual people on the commission that are volunteering their time, which is a huge commitment to help update this file. At the end, I've done some research on comp plans and what you do in cases like this, because a lot of work has been put into it. Will it always need some tweaks? Probably. But what you can do once it's all done is have it reviewed through legal to make sure it meets those expectations. But we have resources within the state of Idaho that we are not actually accessing with respect to building this comp plan. And we should wash it through some of that before we actually fully adopt it. But I don't think we need to scrap it. We have people that this process, unfortunately, I would have liked to seen happen where we did workshop with people more so that we don't have to keep revisiting. Because I want to make sure that I'm respectful also of how much some of the people that are volunteering are putting their time in and how much the community is putting their time into this. And I want to make sure your voice is heard, which is why this is the idea that I had. I don't know that we can't go back in time. We have to have a plan moving forward. And having legal review it is what Ada County did with a similar situation where we had a lot of turnover, a lot of people not happy with it. And then legal actually gave a recommendation for a few times, send it back. It's not really a good plan. And I've looked with our Idaho Association of Counties to kind of do a compare and contrast of our comp plan design versus similar counties in our area to see how they're coming up with it. That is going to require more of this and working with the people that are putting it together.
No disrespect, but not our legal, like Bill Wilson.
No, no, so you need, so to be clear on the legal part, it's a person who is specialized in this area. So I did give a recommendation that since we have so much to do in this area, planning is the most highly visible spot that we have right now. We need to make sure that an attorney well-versed in this topic is the one who gives us that feedback, because otherwise it's not worth our money. And I am particularly concerned with how much our water means to us and everybody else who's watching our water. So we don't want to leave any holes in our comp plan that further attack our natural resources. Yes.
I am out of time, but I wanted to do two things. One is to recognize Fishing Union's contribution here
Yes,
and the donation of personnel to be here.
yeah.
And I'm not gonna need her to get that part of it. I'm sorry. I'm very happy to see you.
And there, it is being recorded, so you'll be able to watch it on YouTube. So you'll get to see him do his magic.
Thank you.
We put him at the end so that people would stay longer.
Yes.
Just to clarify, say earlier, we said there's a February 22nd meeting, and that seems to be the deadline you want to get stuff back, and then there was a mention of a February 9th EOC workshop. Does that have anything to do with the submission of any of those comments?
No,
Okay.
I'm not sure what that is.
Someone else mentioned it, so I just kind of.
So the 22nd is the official next meeting.
Yes. So I think I know what you're thinking. The reason we expedited this was the board was asked to give recommendations on the 8th. I think that's what that date might be. I think the board was asked to come up with recommendations. But I have to go and check to see if they actually agreed, because as you saw, it's not necessarily organized just yet. So
Yeah.
I'll confirm and send you an email, Dan.
I received an email from Jake that there is a workshop on February 9th with the BOCC for you all to ask any questions relating to these two chapters.
Okay,
So in the
Before
traditional,
we got to that.
And it's a public workshop.
So then-
Workshop. Which says,
so then if he scheduled that already, then you'd want to get your input in before that date then.
okay,
I didn't know that was already scheduled, so.
yeah,
Okay,
so we
thanks.
send it to Jake.
You can send it to Jake and copy me if you'd like. Yes, sir.
I was one, Asia, that had mentioned to not rush into this thing and slow down a little bit. Has there been any thought of bringing one or two people that spent time? I know Doug, my wife, there's some other ladies that were in on the subcommittee plans, putting their areas together. For them all to come together and look at trying to merge, mix all of them into something a little bit better to go before the planning, commission, to then be able to make recommendations to you. Because if you look at the different ones, one of them has charts and everything else, and their concern is over in their area, Blanchard's in theirs. Ours was Priest River and Old Town. You've got Selkirk, and then you have, Priest Lake. And I understand we want to get this done and finished and all, but on the other hand, I'm trying to go through and read and understand. It's nice when I can go through something and go, oh, all right, these are the changes. It's been redlined so that I can go and say, all right, we're taking this out of the original, or that's the proposed, knowing what it is versus trying to go through and seeing current, and it's just a small picture of the current and what the proposed is.
So are you recommending that we do workshops in the sub area committees and bring them back to the table and go over the sections? That's not something that we need the county to actually structure. We can do a workshop if you feel there's enough of a group of people that will get together in their individual areas and give input on the sections. But that requires some organization. That's a community effort. So if there is a group of people in a particular area, I will also say that although not in statute, this county has operated by assigning liaisons to commissioners. So if 2 out of 3 agree to do that process, it defaults to the other person following that. That being said, your commissioner liaison for your planning is Commissioner Luke Ahmet. So you guys would reach out to him if you want to. In theory, it should be that the issues can come to any individual commissioner so long as it's not a serial meeting. But I have not spoken with Jake as to whether or not he's going to follow that process or not, so. There's a potential for me having more speed bumps, because if I don't get the interaction, then it slows down what would need to be expedited, because we shouldn't slow down the planning commission. It is hard to get volunteers to be on that planning commission, and so we need to figure out an opportunity to see if there would be support to do that. Which, because it would require some transparency of what are the dates that the planning department is looking at completing the different sections. When is the planning commission going over it? And is there an opportunity, not for an inundation of information, but for someone to be the spokesperson like we did when we were doing those sub areas, to come to that planning commission meeting and give input to the planners in an assistive role? Because those reports are now antiquated. That was so long ago that so much has changed, so much zone and rezoning and building has happened that I don't know that I think Blanchard area is really accurate anymore, because we've grown a lot since then.
I just look at, you have all these subcommittees and all, and I went through the majority when they were presented to the committee, and listening to it and all, and then coming home with the copies and trying to go through and look at them, and it's just like, okay, this one's got a lot of charts in it, this one has, and each area is unique. The way the growth is, or the forest, or whatever. But not having one or two of those people that were involved in that subcommittee, and possibly others, but being able to come together and be able to look at it and say, hey, this is good, this is bad.
And you don't need all agreement. So what's your subcommittee area, and could you get your group together to review what has been suggested so that we can then present it to the planning commission?
Yeah, but you're only covering your area instead of trying to.
Well, that's
merge it
one,
all into
and then
one.
you have to find the person in Sully Valley and then Spirit Valley. So do you have the ability to organize that in your area? And then we can put a call out to the different communities to see if they want to revisit their sub areas to give updated information to the planning commission.
So AJ and an idea here, because so those sub area groups, they represent the will of the people.
Yep.
Number one, that's the will of the people. So the will of the people, I do not think has changed, although things have changed. But the will of the people hasn't changed, and I would say what the will of the people is, if I were to put it in a sentence, would just have to be able to maintain larger lots so that we could maintain a lower density and be a rural county. And so I think to that end, you could have the sub area groups are not being respected. They did a lot of work, just as much work as the planning commission is doing now. Those people met for years. And with the one planning commission meeting that I went to, where all their backs were to us and we weren't even allowed to talk. At that meeting, I heard Debbie Trinan say that we're done with the sub area committees. Basically, what we're doing right now, that's all incorporated into what we're doing right now. So it was my thought when I heard that like, they're not gonna revisit that. So the will of the people will not be in this comp plan unless those sub area committees have a chance to come back and make their will known.
On the
That would be
planning,
through the land use chapter.
and I do know that they're supposed to be using that in conjunction with their updates. Whether or not people feel like their voice is heard is why we have to workshop things and speak a little bit louder. So I don't want to make a judgment on a comment made by a planning commissioner, because she could have simply been answering straight across. We looked at it when we're updating this chapter. That's why I know that I think in our room, I think everybody can say the rural nature is what's important, but I know there are areas that have been saturated with different people that if we are updating the comp plan and we're going to go back to sub area plans, that consideration. I gave the example before that in Blanchard alone, we had our New Year's Eve party and it was like 3 times the number of people and we didn't know half of them. And so that has been something that we felt in district too. I don't know what that growth is in this area. I know there is a lot of people that are interested in this. So if we could take the current sub plans and bring it back to the groups, that might be a reasonable option. If people feel like we don't have the time, just maybe it's a better understanding of how the planning commission is using the current information that's been received. And that one would require me asking that very detailed question of how is it being incorporated into the current comp plan updates?
Yeah, we need to know that, number one, and number two, can it be something so simple as the planning director sending the letter to all of the chairs of the sub area groups to say, hey, are you interested in getting together one more time to understand how your sub area plan is integrated into this comp plan, or how you want it to be so.
Okay. One of the changes that was suggested also was that the planning commissioner chair or the zoning chair, if we don't put it back together, actually be present for some of the hearings so that they can also give their input. So that might also address some of the frustrations of not feeling like your voice is being heard as we build this comp plan. So I can't take credit for it. That was Matt's idea.
So Asia, I was, I was on planning and zoning for 11 years during the update of Title 12.
Mhm.
And we did hire an outside consultant to facilitate it. And I know that there is grant money out there potentially to do that. I mean, this process right now, have been watching, is really hodgepodge and all over the board. And even if you're, and I appreciate that you're trying to bring it together, but it's still like all over the place. And I know that, people have talked about looking at the goals and objectives and policies got way ahead. It should be, the chapters should be developed first, that looking at those, some of this information there, I'm still seeing data missing of future trends in this process. But I wonder, and I don't know, I don't think the current planning department has the bandwidth to do this if they're a fair shake on this job.
So what about this option if
And I'd be willing in my, not very much.
your spare time?
Which is not very much, as you may know.
Yes.
But it may be that, helping to put together a grant so we can look for somebody to help with this process that might have more and facilitate it and look at the other sub areas. I was on a sub area for Priest Lake and I did surveys, I looked at trails, I put hours in when I was there. We put together.
So you're applying to be on the planning and zoning commission?
Well, I already have another.
I know, but we're not meeting on Wednesdays.
I still have a. We'll see.
So what if we did this? What if while we concurrently continue on our path, because we don't want to slow that down, and we're going to get a finished product, I can do some research on what would it cost a consultant to take a look at what we're working on. And then we can put that objectively to the community. And then if the county cannot budget for that, because we are already in the budget year, we can look in May as we come back to the table for budgeting. Do we try to find money for that while we concurrently look for a grant? Or do you say the community, it's going to cost us $15,000 to get this consultant? Do we want to try and crowd fund to have that done for, that's another option. So I can look that information up and see what that would cost and bring it back to the table to see if that would assist.
It just doesn't seem like a really, it's always been hard because we did, when I was on the planning and zoning, we tackled 4 chapters of the comp plan. And I don't know where they're going, the template and what it, the templates are all over the board, all these things are sort of all over the board. And to come up, if you look at other plans, like from similar counties as we are, which I did over time. And I've looked at maybe 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 different counties in the state. We would look at trying to find find a template that works, find one that we can fit into. But for me, that would make sense. And trying to make this a smoother process, because I think there's work that people have done in sub areas, and when it gets thrown out, then we say, why bother doing some of that process?
And part of the purpose of doing workshops is to make sure that we're doing what our statute requires. And one of those things is that we encourage the involvement of the public in this process. So we can revisit that, and I should be able to get some kind of answer by the time we have our next meeting. And I'll add that on my District 2 report of this is the status of looking for someone that could potentially do an assessment.
One of the things relative to that I think needs to be addressed is the definition of a workshop. Because when we went to these meetings, they were billed as workshops, but there was a real disconnect between what people thought they were going to be participating and what actually happened.
Does this feel like a workshop to you?
This feels
Yes,
like-
this is a workshop.
I was afraid you'd be shocked with the pens and paper, so I brought water.
So if you can make sure that the term is clarified so that when people come to these meetings, they know what to expect. And having said that, you know, you're doing this, the question is, can this same thing be workshop for all of the other?
It can be, and the answer is that's why I did the comment section, because the people are the supervisor of electeds. I'm not anybody's supervisor. That's not how it works. You guys are supposed to give your report card. So if you don't feel like your voice is being heard and the issue is being workshopped in such a way, you guys need to start speaking out. You need to say, this is what we see as a workshop. I heard you, we're good. I got your email.
I just want to add one thing.
Yeah.
Please.
Yep.
Just for the record. I felt like we were being treated with contempt. You're right, we are the owners of this process, and I don't feel that we were given ownership of it. And I really resent. And I know that these are volunteers, they've done a tremendous amount of work, just the way that they've gone about really has caused a lot of resentment.
And I hear your issue. I've heard it throughout our community. I've heard the opposite too, but this is a reset for all of it because we have a different expectation moving forward. And we're going to be accountable as commissioner too. That's all I can account for, of making sure that I hear what you have to say and reaching out to the necessary people. I am okay workshopping the rest of the sections if other people don't want to, but I want to also ensure that I'm doing mutual respect for the planners who are putting the time in. And some have been giving a lot of good information as to why they came to be. It's hard to volunteer your time in a public setting. It is really hard to do, but it doesn't mean we don't remind ourselves that we are still serving the public when we accept that volunteer role. And so we have to represent the county. So I hear the issue. And I would like our workshops to be more substantial than what they have been, because I'll be honest, my plan is the next time, like if someone comes on the next hearing and they say hazardous areas, I didn't get to give input, there was a real workshop on that issue, we need to move forward. But if we don't set the foundation of what that really means, then I can't reasonably push forward. That was the goal, to kind of reset our idea and expectations and say it's okay to make your complaint, it's okay to expect the change.
I love this shift and reset. Thank you. Just for the future workshops, so this one was decided at the county commission meeting on whatever date that was. And since you are as an individual commissioner hosting the workshop, my understanding is that it didn't need to be publicly noticed. But if you could attempt to integrate some additional push of information out to the public for future workshops, that would be wonderful.
There is the storming and forming of new teams that occurs. It was requested and it is been pushed to legal because the answer was that because I was a single commissioner that they wouldn't advertise it on the website. The legal has given the input that that's not accurate, that they can put this workshop under the workshop section so that people can actually see it. So that will be corrected on any future workshops that I hold. And then I will do the checks and balances. I did make an assumption that the person just put it on the website and then in passing, I received different information.
So in
that
the
would be
future, any
fixed.
workshops will be on Bonner County's planning website.
Yes. And I will be doing the District 2 report out. That's at the top. That says what the future workshops are that I'm participating in. And I encourage you guys, if you like hearing this is what I've done, this is what I continue to do, that you guys give comments and feedback on that. Because you can gently encourage people to kind of change the format and open up the dialogue. So, I feel accountable to the people. And so I feel that that's the right way for me to communicate it. But if you guys like that, give input. If you want something different, give input on you want me to do something differently. I try to do a little spot where I talk about what community input I've received, because sometimes other people aren't willing to say it, but they have the same issue. So I want to limit the amount of time that I'm responding by just responding to everybody on an issue that has been brought to me with leaving out pertinent information about the individual. Okay.
I have to leave, but I would like to thank you, first of all, for starting this reset. I love it. It's great. I think that the people have been cut out of the process up until now. I don't think that has been done by the planning commission itself, and I would like to recognize their hard work. Those people come and they spend hours and hours and hours, and they're all volunteers, and it's a very difficult job. And so while I might say this planning commissioner said that, or this planning commissioner said this, as a whole, I would like to commend that group for the hours that they put in, and it was not their fault that the process got done the way that it got done. And I know some planning commissioners did not want it done that way. That came from the leaders at the time, and we have different leaders. So thank you, planning commission. I will be involved from here on, but I have to tell you on February 22nd, I'm going to ask the board to not pass this, because I don't believe that the process has been, even though this workshop is great, I don't think that I'll have time, and I think it's a lot to ask the public to go through and not have a red line document where you can just go like, oh yeah, okay, and not see the changes. So unless we have a document where we can clearly see the changes without reading for hours and writing for hours, it's going to be very difficult for me to support it.
So moving forward, you would like the document online to actually be a track change document so that you can see the changes made. That's not, that's.
Proposed legislation statement.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you.
so because you can't conceivably with track changes, as you know, you can put it, or you get all rid of the track changes and you can retrack changes.
Yes.
So you can untrack and track, so.
Okay, that's a very good suggestion to give to planning, because it would probably expedite your review, so you can just scan for that item.
yes.
So can I stop the questions and let Fish and Game off the hook so that they can
Yes.
present their memo so that we can get on to special areas? Because he's been patiently waiting.
Can I ask one real quick question? Have they updated the county website yet for the commissioners? So her name is now listed.
I do know that a person sent that input, and the person, my picture has been updated there. Yes.
I don't know that email addresses are there.
My whole section was updated. I do know that, because I know the person who said they didn't see my face up there. Okay, so let's let Fish and Game go through their issues and concerns on this particular area, so that we can, were you trying to leave?
I was going to try to leave, but I have to stay for this because
And I want to.
thank you so much for doing this.
And I want to say thank you. Fish and Game often does give us input, and it's really valuable to, as we do these comp plans, that the people that are in the special areas give their input on the areas that impact, because we cannot know all of the stuff. I would ask that you explain for areas where it looks like in your report that you deviate from Fish and Game, that you add some, here's the why part, so that we have a better understanding, because that was a question that came up. If you come right here, then they'll hear you better on the streaming.
Okay. So I feel like there was some misunderstanding on with folks who read this. What the point of this was is in special areas, as I read through the current plan, especially places of ecological significance was what I focused on. I looked at Pack River Flats. That's ecologically significant. Priest Lake Basin, of course, Hannah Flats, Lake Ponderay, the Pack River again, but there was no mention of wetlands being of special ecological significance. And so the plan that I quoted I'm not trying to instate the plan. It's actually been instated since 2005, for almost 20 years. But this is what I cited, it's called the Idaho Wetland Conservation Prioritization Plan. And it was made by Idaho Fish and Game, and the Idaho Conservation Data Center, and published in 2005. And what this document does is it ranks wetlands by 3 criteria: the wetland type, wetland function and value, and wetland threat. And what that means is wetland type, there's different types of wetlands, obviously. And specific to North Idaho, we have fen bog wetlands, which are ecologically significant and very delicate. And wetland function and value, obviously, if a wetland's not functioning properly, it loses value. And then wetland threat, and that's threats to development for the most part. So within this document, it ranks the top wetlands in Idaho 1 through 200. And as I read through this document, I found that North Idaho had over a third of these wetlands in the state, of the important wetlands. Furthermore, Bonner County has half of that third. So the fact that these special wetlands that are deserving of protection, that are high function, delicate, and unique to North Idaho, weren't listed in the ecological significant section. That's what my letter suggests, is that they be added to that. And when talking about wetlands and development, people mention, well, we have a wetland banking system. Those are man-made created wetlands. Those do not compare to a naturally functioning ecological significant wetland. Once these fen wetlands that we have in North Idaho are damaged, they don't recover. So that was why, to get these wetlands further protected, I do realize that there's already wetland code, and I wasn't talking about changing the wetland code. This is more to show people in Bonner County that we do have these special places, these special wetlands, by putting them into that section. So that was the large part of what my letter was talking about. It wasn't, I wasn't talking about changing wetland development building code rules at all. I was talking about putting them into ecologically significant areas. Then there was some, I mentioned wells. I realized that we're not Idaho Water Resources. The talk of wells in here was to make a point. It wasn't really talking about us regulating. And I realized that Idaho Fish and Game, we are not the permitting agency for wetlands. We talk about wetlands because they're ecologically significant. There are rare plants, rare animals, and to maintain the biological diversity in North Idaho, we need to have some protections on these places. So I think there were specific questions about whether or not we were the agency that has oversight over wetlands. I realized that I was talking strictly in wetland habitat, wildlife habitat, plant habitat. The Army Corps has oversight. I realize that. So, and then I also put in here that some more information there was a section on hatcheries. It's mostly not correct anymore. And I said, if you're interested in changing it and updating it, that was mostly to see if the planning department was reading my letters. I haven't heard back from them. Right.
Now I know what to check for email.
Yeah, I haven't heard back from them.
Shock.
But that section is mostly erroneous and dated, and I have all the corrections for that if they ask for them. So that was the point of adding those to a special site. And as I look through some of the special site, you know, if a pull-up picnic area makes it, I feel like our special wetlands that Bonner County has a lot of should be in the plan as special sites. So.
She's gotta get, we gotta get questions.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I actually have a question on whether, you've determined in the existing comp plan. If, or recommendation so far, whether fisheries and the, fishery of our Priest Lake and Ponderay basins are adequately addressed, or if that just hasn't even occurred yet.
So. That brings up a point. I'll get to your question, but in Bonner County's planning's defense, I comment on everything, and it's usually I don't have any comment, or I send a letter and I get an email back from them saying this has been received by the planning department. There was a short time, and I don't know whether it was an email glitch or what it was, but I didn't get those back. And I think that's why some of this stuff didn't make it to the planning department. I don't know, but I followed up with Jenna and Jana and got all this stuff submitted. But there was one of those was the fishing section and the hunting section. And I went to our wildlife manager and our fisheries manager, had them rewrite the sections and got them submitted. So those have been submitted now so that they're up to date.
Is that under the natural resource section?
I think. No, there was a hunting section and a fishing section, and I'm not sure what, I can't remember. All the sections are kind of blended together in my mind.
17 casualties.
I know, I don't recall.
Probably gonna be
either of those
resources, I guess.
Thank you, Meredith. In this chapter 4, ecological significance, section, I have been concerned by the disparity between the information that's provided about Priest Lake and that about Lake Ponderay. And specifically, Lake Ponderay has only 3 sentences. This is page 12. And it mentions only kokanee spawn. Mentions kokanee spawn as being the only ecologically significant factor of Lake Ponderay. And I'm wondering if your comments have addressed that. I mean, bull trout, all the other diversity of species and habitat.
Right. I mean, yeah, that could be completely rewritten. And, kokanee are great, but they're an introduced species that there's a lot more about Lake Ponderay that is significant.
So since we have this new process, are you willing to write another letter addressing?
Absolutely.
Thank you. She stole my comment. That was exactly what I was gonna say, because I read that and I thought, what, there's 2 sentences about this gigantic thing. It has so much ecological significance, and then how it plays, wetlands obviously play into and are next to the rivers and the lakes and.
Well, and nobody's trying to build houses on Lake Ponderay though.
Well, that's not true.
But
There's still proposal, so. Not true. Yeah, I guess I just, on the same note, the natural resource section, I think, is probably where hunting and fishing was, because there is no maybe land use, but and so there's duplicate topics. So, Lake Ponderay is covered in natural resources. And I agree that it should be better covered in, special areas and hazardous area. Well, anyway, my thinking is that if we get to a chapter where Lake Ponderay is being addressed, for instance, or the Lake Ponderay Basin, the Priest Basin, that we recognize the goal for that, all the goals within for that particular topic, and link it back to one chapter that does have every single piece of that Lake Monterey Basin. So, archaeology, recreation, fishery, ecology, just have one place where everything on the Monterey Basin is, Priest Basin. It also includes, each of those could include numerous tributaries. So just selecting those two water bodies, I think is not comprehensive. Or that we develop a natural research section well for surface water issues and our public waters, and then cut and paste the piece that's relevant to that other chapter, like special resources. So that's just my thinking on that.
Well, from a planning perspective, you have to have it in both chapters, because the natural resource section is going to bring forth all of the natural resources. It's just information about the natural resources, and then where it relates to, hazards or special sites, that would inform the built environment on what about those natural resources could be hazardous to life or property.
Yeah, and I do suggest that, shorelines be added to hazardous areas.
Yes.
Because those soils are eroding due to, saturated soil and waves and different than a floodplain. And it is, a hazard to property, and life if you build in on a shoreline that's gonna fall into the lake. So, I think that you can have a statement that says, we'll go back to special areas. Lake Ponderay or the Ponderay Basin is considered a special area and all it's for all of these reasons, and you can find very detailed information on why it's a special area over here.
Yeah.
And there's a section in natural resources that says, it's protected, it's threatening, and do the same for hazards, like if wetlands are mentioned in hazardous areas, because I agree with Merritt that wetlands should be added to special areas and also hazardous areas. Because wetlands are wet land and they shouldn't be built in, and if people do end up building in them, it's posing a risk to the county and their property and their lives. And so that because wetlands would also need to be in natural resources and well explained. And so you can explain why building in wetlands or why that's a hazardous area. And then link it back to exactly where to find the detailed information, so that we're not rewriting everything.
Yes.
That's not his thing. Instead of the.
Well, I just think it's really implementing you, and it would make it easier for you to, for everything, yeah.
Because each chapter has a definition of what is hazardous, what is special area. So you wouldn't be able to do the recommendation that Commissioner Bradshaw had of just saying wetlands reference
I
these
agree.
chapters. Because you have
completely
to
agree.
show how that topic fits that definition of that chapter. And we
Absolutely.
want to make sure that we're giving as much detail about the individual aspect of that area. I do have a question to ask. This has gone on for a while and we've gotten through our guest speaker. Do you want to continue with this or do you want to email the next section? So thoughts of
I can stick.
calling it now or push through special areas? Oh,
But I really appreciate the amount of work that you that you've done to respond by agency letters. I would particularly like to commend Carson. It's very detailed responses. As far as chapter 4, ecological significance, in chapter 5, wild significance. I don't know if we got the very detailed recommendations of also active made for updates.
Right.
But one of the things that you didn't mention, our person didn't mention, for example, is I'm curious, corridors and wintering areas, for example. And I think maybe in this document, we probably should say something about visitor areas. Area. Is that type of specificity, you think, helpful in terms of agency comments and things that we're the planning department to consider?
And yeah, I think that I was trying to balance specificity and brevity. So that's why I didn't go into all of that. I didn't, because I looked at what was in the previous plan versus what could be added. And that's where I just don't know where that balance is.
So I would just like to recommend that maybe more specificity be added. That's just one comment. I have another question, please, about the critical habitat. Can you give us an update on where that's at, and can you address the planning commission's attitudes that critical habitat isn't necessary in making these kinds of individual decisions?
So honestly, I've been round and rounds with folks in my own department on this, and whether or not a critical habitat map is what is needed versus something more like a critical habitat. For lack of a better term, like a dichotomous scheme, so that you're not looking at a 11 by 14 piece of paper from 2002, which is what their current model is, as critical habitat, but more go through the process. Is this near a wetland? If so, here's some recommendations. Is this near a riparian corridor? If so, here's some is this unsubdivided land? What's the size of it? And look at specific criteria of what is being proposed and what is being developed to come up with recommendations based on that versus just a checkbox. Did you look at the map? Checkbox, it's not within critical habitat. Because right now, if you overlay all of our species of greatest conservation need maps, everything within Bonner County that is not currently subdivided and large tracts of land is all critical habitat. So if I were to today be forced to say, give me this critical habitat map, it would be highlighted everything in the county. There you go. And is that the best thing to do? And so I'd like to revisit that whole process and come up with a better way to address critical habitat so that it's not outdated as soon as we turn in this paper map. I just don't think that's the way to do it.
It's the swap that's just recently completed.
Right.
And you have maps.
Right.
And you think those maps would be helpful?
I think they will be. The problem with the swap that's just been completed is we're just now getting ready to, and for those of you who don't know, it's the State Wildlife Action Plan. We're getting ready to submit that to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who will tell us whether it passes muster or not. And once it does and it's published, then I can use those maps. But as of right now, my hands are tied on that. And I have our old swap maps, which again, if you overlay all the swap maps, everything in Bonner County is critical habitat. So I just don't think that that's going to be an acceptable way to address it.
Could we at least include those maps as an appendix to the comprehensive plan so that people could see what's existing on the landscape?
I don't think in a paper map, because it would just be a big blob, but I think the answer is a GIS map or some sort of map that doesn't become antiquated as soon as it's printed. That can kind of morph with the county as it develops. I think that's something that I need to speak to the county about, because I think a paper map, it's like driving a car off the lot. As soon as you drive it off the lot, it's yours, and it's not gonna, it's not gonna change, and the county's changing so fast that just to create one map that's good today, a year from now, it's gonna be completely different.
Just one last question. You have a statewide perspective. Is what Bonner County is doing is kind of within normal limits in terms of the comprehensive planning process and specifically the map. Is anybody else is any other county using a critical habitat map that's, for example, 20 years old? And do you know of any other county that has been using a 20-year-old critical habitat map for their planning decisions?
No, most counties have relatively updated maps. Some counties have gone away from critical habitat maps because as a state agency, we don't actually deal in critical habitat. Critical habitat is a federal term, and those are critical habitats for, say, bull trout. It's well defined within the county already. You could go online and you can find those maps online right now. Versus we have species maps for these species of greatest conservation need, and they are not, they're more broad, and they speak to habitat types. And if you overlay them on top of each other, basically what you come out with is edge habitat is really important, and open lands that are kind of untouched, unlogged, etc. Actually, some of them are logged. It actually is helpful, but those are the lands that are important. So it encompasses. It just kind of, it blots out everything on paper. So you have to be able to look at it layer by layer, which isn't something I think that folks are going to want to do. And so that's why coming up with sort of a walkthrough process of looking at a piece of land and its habitat might be the best way forward, rather than just saying, here's the map and it's going to be good for 20 years, because it's not going to be good for 1 year. If it's just a static map.
Thank you.
I have a question for you. The Idaho, we call it prioritization.
The wetland prioritization plan.
Yeah, the one I held up there, is that the 05 edition? Now, there's a 2012 edition out as well, right? Now, those maps are different between those.
So the rankings.
The maps in regards to the rank, there's some examples in there.
Right.
05, and then you go ahead and pull the 2012, and they're vastly different. And so my question for you is as I read some of this stuff from the 2012, so the GIS model of potential wetland habitat across all the state of Idaho is based on compilation of existing land cover. The model tended to only estimate the extent of the wetland habitats. This model has been ground truth in only small areas of the state. So have those areas been actually delineated? Because when we look at the NWI, the National Wetland Report right now, it says right on it, this is non-jurisdictional. The thing are, it have to be delineated before we go ahead and use those as a jurisdictional map. Are those maps that are included there the same way? Are they non-jurisdictional in that sense? Have they all been delineated?
So some of the delineation for the Idaho plan came from Fish and Wildlife delineations. As far as being ground truth, they had to go to each one of these wetlands to develop a plan to rank each one. And as far as as far as that, in 2005, they had been to these, but they don't really delineate size. They're just saying that these areas, they were more talking about areas. And then added to the delineation of the Fish and Wildlife wetland map for size. They were looking more at threat, function, and that's how they ranked it.
Quality, rarity, weakness. So can I just clarify, I just want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly, and that your assessment was based on those descriptions you need, rare, quality, that kind of thing, but there was maybe not a need to actually get a delineation for your report because of the fact that the Army Corps of Engineers would require a delineation before they issue a fill permit for them.
Right.
So that's where the delineation comes into play.
Yes. And again, we're not the permitting agency for any of that. I was just commenting that I thought that because we have these things in Bonner County, that they should be added to a special area. More than anything, it's just, it seemed like we skipped over that in the plan.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you for bringing it here.
Thank you.
Yes.
Was there anyone planning on staying that you'd like me to move on to special areas?
What's your need?
All right.
I think it's short.
Actually, you showed up, we all.
I don't know. Can I just say thank you to everybody? I'm no one special, but I want to say thank you so much. Because this was very short notice and you all took the time to be here today and I really appreciate it just as a citizen of this county. So thank you.
The agenda sheets, do you want to keep those, if you got comments and all, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want us to do, I mean, if you're supposed to, if you want to work on it some more, go ahead, but, I was gonna type mine up. Send it to planning and well, overachiever. Good for you. So. Question on what things you can still run. Oh, right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, like, they're on the website. Oh, if you want it, yeah. Yours. Molly, yeah, that's two here. Yeah, I guess I'll take. I have those. Take some time. I've already commented, but I didn't do one. All right, that's good. Official comment. Thanks for coming. Thanks so much. For the night. I'm not. I'm just. No, I saw to respond. But I lost my memory. That's where you hold it. Workshop. So maybe she says. No, it's 87. Workshop. I was right on it. But she doesn't seem to know about it. No, I mean, no, Jake doesn't. Oh, she's saying that when she hosts this, she's going to, yeah. Shouldn't start posting. Jake's thing, I have no idea how that's. We don't know about it. It is considered. The commissioner to ask questions. He doesn't have a time. And in the email, he replies to me. It was hearing them. I don't go back. That's just the dates. Well, I guess I don't necessarily want to stall the process, but my whole point is that they're very much just. Like, it's an agenda. 7 days more. They're not going to, that's why I told you that today. I don't see them do it. If you're gonna, if you want public comments ahead of 7 days. So then you need to announce. And now they want to 9. So I'll ask that questions.
Yeah,
that's two.
That is missing.
But I'm just saying.
Yeah.
They're not good at seeing. They have to be convinced.
Everybody else is there. I really Dave Frank wanted, he was saying.
We want to, Bible, we encourage them.
I will try to convince the rest of you.
I love
Set up 6 people. Time commission, the chair stepped out.
I just love my county and I want to.
Anyway. I struggled with. I just inherited last Tuesday. But I will trust this time.
And 5 generations.
Quite strict. 65 says. Analysis. Actually, do analysis. Just what's going back.
I feel like we're done. Yeah, thank you so much for everything, for showing up and all right, Rebecca, I'll be in touch with you. Protection program.
That's right.
When did I say that? So we sent a letter which one to one of the challenging folks coming in. All of that. So reaching now engineer. We're all done. Yeah, thank you. I've been at vision community as cross one of things.
Most of the components,
And I'm just wondering if.